All right, welcome in Powers on Sports Podcast. We are less than 7 days away from the college football playoff semifinal games. We got the Rose Bowl. We have Alabama, Michigan. Then we go to the Sugar Bowl, and Texas and Washington go at it. And we are going to break it down from all different angles. We're going to have a former head coach with us, which is going to be Coach Jim Leavitt here in a second. We're going to go to the Alabama Crimson Tide Sports Network, talk to Chris Stewart from who will be on the play-by-play call for the Crimson Tide, and we'll be getting talking to Eric Henry, who's the beat reporter for the Texas Longhorns. But first, the coach, former head coach, all-time winningest coach in University of South Florida history. He is a long veteran of the coaching world, both as a coordinator, head coach, everything in between. He was a heck of a player back in the day. Here in here in the Tampa Bay area at Dixie Hollins High School over in St. Petersburg. Went on to play at Missouri. Former head coach USF Bulls Jim Leavitt. Happy holidays, happy New Year coming up, Coach. How are you?
I'm good. Merry Christmas. It's what a special time of the year. It really is. It's I've had a great time with my girls. Christmas and everything, and it's been really special. There's no question. That's one nice thing about not coaching, the time I get to spend with my girls. I never had this kind of luxury, and usually in bowl games or prepping for bowl games. So it's been nice.
That's even better too. When now were you always somebody? Did you ever like the cold weather? Or is it beautiful? You love this 75 degrees and sunny this time of year, or are you somebody who likes a little cold weather this time of year?
Well, I do. I like cold weather. When I was in Colorado is very different. It's like winter wonderland. The snow comes down. It's just beautiful. You don't have as much wind and ice as you do like when I was in Iowa or Kansas. So I was spoiled in Colorado. It was really nice. The girls and I always got out and made, a snowman and, did all that. And laying in the snow and doing those angels and all that stuff, so I miss that. So when we get to cold weather here, I enjoy it. I really like it. I don't think we'll get snow, but cold weather's nice.
There you go. All right, before we get to the game, I want to ask you a couple of just general college football questions. We've had signing day in the last few days. Obviously, signing day has now been complicated with the transfer portal and all that stuff. Do you think, from a transfer portal perspective, do you think the NCAA should allow guys to be in the portal when there's still playoff games going on, bowl games? Because we've seen these rosters get wrecked and decimated. Great examples at Texas, the backup quarterback at Texas entered the transfer portal before their playoff game, and now that puts a little disarray into the backup quarterback situation at Texas. How do you think the NCAA's handled this transfer portal situation, being allowed to do it at the 1st of December?
Well, I think it's all a mess. Quite honestly, I think it's an absolute mess, and I think all the coaches would agree. There's got to be some type of guidelines, and but nobody knows. Nobody knows. It's all uncharted territory, and everybody's kind of grasping at things that they don't really have any idea about, and they don't know how it's going to play out, and that's the problem. And your governing body, the NCAA, they did it. They're trying to do everything to hang on. Because I'm kind of surprised the NCAA is still in existence, to be honest with you.
Right.
Because these conferences are getting so powerful with the television money that I would think they'd want to bring in their own governing body, at the different levels, because there's some things that are going to apply to Austin Peay that's not going to apply to Alabama, and right. With this, it's just a different deal. And, until people start getting their teeth in all of it and start putting together some guidelines, it's going to continue to be a mess. But to be honest with you, I don't know how, the cap is already off. I don't know how you're going to bring it back to, right. It's basically NFL football, kind of like the minor leagues and Major League Baseball.
Yep.
It's like AAA, and, people are going to chase the money. You sit there and you say, well, how can you tell a player not to go out and transfer portal when, first of all, the bowl games are all different times. You got to have some time to figure out where you're going to go. The recruiting timeline is very tight to get into school. And some guys are transferring and getting into school before the bowl game and are able probably to play in a bowl game.
Right,
They're transferred from one school to the other.
Right.
I mean, it to me is the craziest thing. But if you are coaching, which I'm not, but if you are coaching in the profession, you're there, you better embrace it and you better try to figure out the best you can. Because none of the coaches, I don't think any coach thinks it's great or loves it, but it's the way it is. So you better roll with it and do the best you can, because there's so many. We could talk the whole time today on just the transfer portal and how it has completely hurt so many high school players,
right,
and hurt so many junior college players. It's just because people are going to go after those transfer portal people. When I was at Southern Methodist, say we had 25 scholarships, 15 were transfer portal, and then maybe 9 high school kids, maybe 1 JC kid.
right.
Think about it. Where before it was maybe 4 or 5 JC kids and maybe 20 high school players.
Right.
Now you multiply that throughout the entire country, because who wouldn't want to take a player that's already gone through, the discipline and the getting acquainted with college life,
the nutrition, getting acclimated,
all of it,
right?
Instead of a high school player, unless that high school player is like a 5-star or 4-star guy. But what about the 2-star guy that really is a 5-star guy, but nobody even knows it? Right. It's hard. So you get me going, obviously.
All right, what'd you think of the committee? And I think I know where you're at from a coaching perspective. What'd you think of the committee's decision to leave out Florida State? You have the argument they won all their games 13-0. They did all the things they needed to do, but then you also have the other argument. They don't have their starting quarterback, the main trigger man, the guy that kind of was the leader of why they were 13-0. Your thoughts on Florida State being left out?
I think it's, BS. I was going to say the other, but I think it's ridiculous. Florida State deserves to be in. They won all their games. You're not going to tell me what I can't do with our football team and get them ready to play. What if somebody would have told me before we went out and played Florida State with Bobby Bowden's team that just beat BYU 50-something to 14? They're nationally ranked pretty high. And Matt Grothe, who is a great quarterback, tears his knee up the week before Florida State. And I've got to go with a true freshman who had never played a snap, BJ Daniels.
Wow.
What if they would have told me we couldn't have played that game because of our quarterback situation? But no, we went up there and beat them 17-7, and it's one of the greatest stories of all time. This could have been a great story for Florida State. It could have been a great story for the rest of those players, how they would rally around their team, how they would rally around each other and be a team and not be focused on one particular player. It was all about money. It was all about TV, and that's the truth. I mean, if you really looking at the whole picture, why does Texas get in? Texas beat Alabama when South Florida almost beat Alabama. Alabama wasn't the same team then,
right,
as they are now. So why does it always have to be the Alabama or Florida State? You know why? Because people have an easier time, debating that one, because Alabama beat the #1 team in the country, Georgia, and won the SEC. Why wouldn't they say between Florida State and Texas? Texas got beat by OU, who got beat by Oklahoma State.
Right.
I mean, it's all ridiculous. To me, you take the 3 undefeated teams and then you debate between your Alabama and Texas. And that's a debate. No question. Yep. But you got 3 undefeated teams that won their conferences. They should be in. End of story. The committee was it was all about the SEC, all about the money, because now the SEC basically has 2 teams in the Final Four. They've got Texas, which is, yes, Big 12, but they're going in the SEC. And you got Alabama.
There you go.
So, I mean, it's so obvious. It's unbelievable. It's crazy. But in our world, with what happens, and you could even get me into politics now with the whole thing with, I don't even want to go there. But I think it's wrong.
I got you.
I mean, what do you tell those players as a head coach?
I know. I figured that was going to be your answer as a coach. Obviously, if you win, the goal. Let me ask you this: do you think you should be guaranteed? No, I don't. Do you think you should be guaranteed a spot if you win all your games? Because you can make the argument a team like Liberty, the Boise States of the world back in the day, should you be guaranteed a spot in a playoff situation if just because you win all your games?
No, not with Liberty because they're scheduled. I mean, everybody in the country, there's no debate on that.
Okay.
But if you're in the ACC, if you're in the Big Ten, if you're in the Pac-12, which had 8 nationally ranked teams at the beginning of the year, including Colorado, the strongest Pac-12 has been. I mean, if you just want to put the 4 best teams out there, why isn't Georgia in there?
Right.
Georgia loses 1 game, and it's to Alabama in a very, very close game. So why wouldn't you put Georgia in? I think Ohio State still has an argument. What about them? I mean, it's always going to be a debate. But you're talking to a guy that grew up that played college ball in the 70s, and I love the old system where everybody, just named a national champion and everybody complained about it. They said they had to go to playoffs because it wasn't a true national champion. What's the difference now? What if Florida State beat Georgia?
Right.
And they're undefeated and they beat a team that was number 1 throughout the year. You tell me that there can't be a split vote?
Right.
And Florida State be a number 1 team in the country? Now, what's unfair to Florida State is now the fact that they're playing Georgia, but they're not going to have all their players.
Right.
Because a number of their top defensive ends going in getting ready for the draft. You don't blame them because of the money involved.
For sure.
This is not going to be the same Florida State team without 4 or 5 or 6 guys because their defense could carry them. Their defense was that good. You saw them beat a very good Louisville team, and you saw them go down to the swamp when the Gators had to win that game. He's sitting there with his job on the line. When if it wasn't for the fact they probably paid over 30, they had to buy out about $30-something million and giving them 2 years. But that's a real discussion on that one because Florida now is kind of getting left behind.
Right.
But that's another topic. So,
all right, last off the field topic, then we'll get into the games a little bit. Obviously, we all know all the story about the Michigan scouting scandal and all that stuff that's kind of percolated throughout the year. And this question is not Michigan related. This is a question for you as a coach. When you knew somebody you were coaching against was doing stuff illegal, whether it's illegal, nefarious, whatever word you want to use, did you as a coach ever confront a coach that said, hey, I know you're cheating or I know you're doing stuff that you're not supposed to be doing? How did you as a coach with your fellow colleagues in the profession, how did you ever handle something where you knew somebody you were competing against, whether it was the same conference or a friend of yours or whatever, you knew a guy was doing something they shouldn't be doing from the coaching world? How did you handle that?
Well, first of all, you better make sure about being a glass house. You better make sure that you're not doing some things that when you start raising some issues, that there's not stuff going on in your own backyard that you might not have been aware of. I think it's garbage what they're calling out Harbaugh and Michigan with. I think everybody does what they're doing. I think that's a bunch of baloney. I mean, I'll promise you, I saw that stuff going on all the time. That's up to you to the signals and I mean, when I was at Kansas State, we used to film the other team year after year in the Big 8, back in the Big 8, and we filmed their signal guy so that in the summer we could study it. Because we're going to play the same people year after year after year. And after a while, we end up getting their signals. I know for a fact some of the top head coaches in America, and if I told you their names, blow you away, that have done unbelievable things in scouting and things like that. That's not now where I got upset was recruiting. Like if a head coach came and was not supposed to be on the road, and I'm battling my tail off to get a recruit, and he goes into a home where he's not even supposed to be on the road, then yeah, I had no problem calling somebody out. I didn't ever worry about the fraternity. I never worry about all those kind of things. If you do something like that wrong, I'm gonna call you out on it, and I'm gonna first go right to you to get it stopped right now. Then I'd go to your AD, and then I'd go to the NCAA if I had to. And that did happen a couple of times, but I got it cleared up right away when I called the coach. And, because when I was in South Florida, we were always top 25 recruiting classes. We were we were up there. We were bringing in some really good players, but we worked extremely hard to do it. And I know everybody works, but there's so much cheating going on right now. Of course, it's so different now when you can just pay players. It's just like with Oregon getting some of the players here. They get out there. Eugene, Oregon rains 8 months out of the year. It's not the most incredible city out there. I lived there 2 years. The people are awesome. They got great people as far as supporting Oregon football.
Sure.
That part. My point is this: Phil Knight's worth probably $42 billion. You don't think this NIL and transfer portal and all this stuff? I mean, the quarterback from Oklahoma goes to Oregon. I think he got out of there because he was going to go to Mississippi State with Levy,
Yeah.
because that was the OC. And then all of a sudden his transfer portal, and all of a sudden, ching, he's probably sitting there thinking, man, I get paid as much as one of these top quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And why that's important is because if you get hurt your senior year as a quarterback, you might have those insurance with London,
Right.
those insurance. And I did it with our players in South Florida because we had first round picks, we had second round picks.
Sure.
And you're trying to protect yourself. Well, here, if you could make $1 million now, well, why not take it? I would.
Right. No, it's crazy. It's crazy the war chest. Some of these schools, the Texas, the Oregons of the world, the Alabamas of the
you can
world.
all cheat now. So it's so different. It's probably good I'm not in it. I struggle. I miss coaching. There's no doubt, because I love teaching, and I love doing things that people don't think you can do.
Right.
That will always, because you look at my resume, it's all about taking programs that nobody thought could win and win. It's even in the NFL, with the 49ers and what we did there, and Kansas State and certainly South Florida didn't have a football. They have a football program. They didn't have a football.
Football. No, you're right. No, you're right.
So, it's I don't know.
All right, let's get down the field stuff. Yeah, let's get on the field. Let's talk. I want to talk the Texas-Washington game first in the Sugar Bowl. A kid I know you probably know, and you probably maybe recruited to some degree, Michael Penix, local Tampa kid. Has had a great career. How does a kid like Penix get out of the state of Florida when he's coming out of high school? How does he get to Indiana, not to a Florida State, Miami, even a USF type of school? How does that happen?
Well, these guys, the quarterbacks are the most, most important position. And these schools in Florida are not just going to Florida; they're going all over the nation, and they get weighed and swayed by 5 stars and 4 stars and all that. So I can easily see why. And it's not like Indiana's a bad school,
right?
And Indiana's in the Big Ten, and Indiana had, their coach that they had that just got let go. Coach had played in high school for a while,
right?
Had done a great job in Indiana, and quarterback could sit there and think, well, hey, I can go to Indiana, and you can kind of recruit him, saying, man, you can come in and play right away, or earlier than some other places like Florida State, or Miami. So that doesn't surprise me. I don't know what happened in Indiana because I don't really know his whole story, but what he's done, and I've watched him a bunch this year at Washington, has been done a tremendous job. He's been a tremendous leader, and the team certainly seems to rally around him. And I like Washington quite a bit. Ronnie McKeefrey, who was my strength coach for 9 years at South Florida, is the strength coach at Washington right now.
Nice.
So it's kind of fun to see them in it. And let me tell you, most people did not think that Washington was going to beat Oregon for the second time, because Oregon was on a roll. They were burying everybody.
They were.
I mean, good teams. And for Washington to rise up and beat them the second time is impressive, because Oregon could argue about being one of the top 4 teams. They have an argument. If Washington's undefeated, and that's the only team to beat them, because nobody knows how good Washington is.
How do these coaches handle the 3.5 weeks off? I mean, obviously they got done playing the first week of December. They've had a couple of weeks for kids to get done with final exams and all that. Now you have about a 14, 16-day period before the exams are over until the game. How do you as the coach schedule that couple of weeks? Do you handle the contact part of things earlier in the 2 weeks, or do you save maybe some padded practices later? How do you handle that as a coach?
Well, you give them the first week off right after your last game to heal their bodies, to get rehab. You make sure your strength coach is going right away. You want them still in the weight room. Some guys need to stay out of the weight room, stay out of everything for a number of days, though. Other guys don't. You're really working with your young guys too that are not playing that much,
Right.
letting them do some scrimmaging and letting them really, you really work with those guys the most that week. Plus, you're right in the middle of recruiting. That's why you give them a week off, get your coaches out because you're under the gun with this early signing day because most people at the top programs are signing most of their guys in that early signing period, which had been done. It's year round, recruiting's year round. So, but you got to put a lot of closure on that. And then when you're coming back, no, I wouldn't put them in full pads right away. I don't know if I'd have them in full pads at all till the game. I think I probably would a couple of 2 days, 3 days, just to kind of get back on edge. So I probably would do that, but I would most times shoulder pads and helmets. You don't want to lose your best player for these games. Plus, you're planning on 2 games, not just one.
Right.
So you got to look at that because all these teams are going to look to win a national championship. I mean, do you do any scrimmaging? A little bit to keep everybody up. You want to try to do some things to get good against good, just to stay on edge. But those guys at this point should be pretty smart about how to handle all that, and they're not going to take anybody to the ground. Not going to do anything stupid.
Right.
But right when you come back, you want your strength coach to really do a lot of conditioning. After a week, do a bunch of running.
Right. Right.
Try to really get that going, and then get into all your teamwork. Most of it's going to be teamwork. They're going to do some individual work. You'll probably cut those down to about 10 minutes periods with the individual work, but you mostly want to spend a good amount of time on your team stuff and kicking.
Special teams. Yep.
Yeah, you got to really do an enormous amount of work on the special teams.
Yeah, I mean, because to me, when you get that time off, that the fundamentals are the part that kind of wane a little bit. The footwork, just the basic tackling kind of stuff, are the things that kind of wane when you take 2 or 3 weeks off and you don't, there's not much contact. Talk about
plus your coaches. They've got to break down all the film. You're gonna have your analysts and your GAs do most of that work.
Yep.
Because the coaches are recruiting and they're recruiting so hard. But you're breaking down every game. But you're only going to want to use the games that probably apply to you the best, like what defense and offense is similar to what you're doing,
right,
and really analyze those games and then the most recent games. But then you got to have your GAs and your analysts start working on the other 2 teams that are playing, because you're not going to get as much time there for the national championship game, and you got to be ready for that. So there's a lot of work being done right now, and there's not much time.
As a coordinator, play caller, defensive, guru, and even offensive guys, how much during this 2 or 3 weeks is it the tendencies to want to come up with new stuff in the lab, new defensive, new play calls, as opposed to really perfecting the things you guys are good at? How is that balance of trying to come up with new stuff that maybe they haven't seen, as opposed to really getting dialed into the things that you're really good at?
Absolutely need to have some new things. And on defense, you need to have a pressure package that they have not seen. You've got to put it in. You got to work on that. You got to get on that right away, because you haven't had any games to really be able to use it. But you're a fool if you don't put in some pressure that they have not seen, that they have not worked on. Offensively, same thing. I think you're out of your mind if you don't have some different wrinkles, different gadgets, different plays they have not
formational
seen.
things, personnel groupings.
Absolutely. Especially when you see some teams like, how did Oklahoma beat Texas? Looking at that film, what are some things that kept Texas off balance? Same thing with Michigan. The Ohio State games, a big one. They'll look at that one pretty hard. Oregon. They'll look at Washington against Oregon a bunch, because Oregon had all that time to play them twice. So they obviously scouted Washington really well. So really look at that film really hard. And Alabama, you got to go back and watch the Auburn game. You got to look at that really hard because Hugh Freeze did a great job
Right.
in that game, with them. And then you're certainly going to watch Georgia. Those games would be huge for me. I would throw out the South Florida early games because their quarterback wasn't in a groove yet. He was later on. Alabama getting ready for Alabama is not as many film. I mean, you're looking at more of the second half of the season.
And with Michigan, a team I know you know a little bit with Coach Harbaugh, the power running game, the different blocking schemes, that offensive line, the physicality. To me, that's going to be a very interesting thing in both these games. You got the physicality of Michigan and Texas, and Alabama's physical too, but then you have a little more of the finesse with Washington. Washington likes to throw it all around the yard. They got 3 pro receivers. They can run the ball too, but really Texas has really shown their physicality has been a big difference for them this year as opposed to years past.
Yeah, but how do they compare with the Pac-12 and Washington? Washington uses those tight ends as well. So I don't know, and it's interesting. They've all been on somewhat of a big stage. Alabama's been a lot on a big stage. Michigan certainly has, but I don't know if Michigan's schedule. People are going to look at the schedule compared to Alabama's schedule,
right?
And that's going to be the big question mark. I think this is a different Michigan team that's going into this thing than they've had in the past. I think their entire offensive line, most all those guys are back, and I think that has set a pretty good foundation for them. They've gone through a lot of adversity with Coach Harbaugh not being on the field for all those games, and they had to rally together. They had, which is really interesting dynamic. I mean, most people out there are probably going to give Alabama the edge on this game. I think it'll be a great game. I probably think Alabama and Washington will probably be the two that'll play in the finals. Just like a number of years ago when Chris Peterson was head coach of Washington, and Washington got in the Final Four. That was in 2016, I think.
Yep. Jake Browning, the kid that's playing for the Bengals now, was the quarterback.
I was a DC at Colorado that year, and we won 10 that year. We should have gone to the Rose Bowl, but the same thing happened to us that happened to Florida State. We won. We were the team. Washington beat us in the Pac-12 championship game, which means that if Washington goes to the Final Four, we should go to the Rose Bowl. They didn't take us to the Rose Bowl. They took USC to the Rose Bowl because they thought USC was going to draw more televisions and was going to be more with the money. That was completely ridiculous. Now, I ended up going to Oregon, so I didn't coach in their bowl game. They played in the Alamo Bowl, but it'll be interesting to see who ends up getting to the. I mean, they're all good teams. Obviously, they all can play.
How do you think Michigan will handle? And they probably haven't seen this in the Big Ten this year. A mobile quarterback like Milroe, a kid that can really run, as opposed to more of drop back passers that you're seeing in the Big Ten. The Michigan didn't really play a guy that could really hurt them with his legs like Milroe can.
Yeah, I mean, he's so big and strong as well.
How do you practice against that when you know you have a very mobile quarterback? When you maybe don't have somebody on your roster that can emulate what he does?
Oh, what I would do is I'd put a receiver at quarterback, or somebody that is as close to his stature that can run. And I'd probably use 2 quarterbacks on a scout team, and we'd work very hard at him because that is a key to their offense. You're going to have a spy and maybe 2.
Yeah.
I thought the way Georgia, I think they did that with a couple spies, was pretty good. Especially if you could take one of the spies and when there's an opening, let him go and let him attack to give you that 4th man rushing, and then have the other spy just see how when they flush them. Also, you've got to have got to do a great job with your front 4. Your outside rushers cannot just run by the quarterback. They've got to bully the tackle, and they've got to push the pocket. And then you've got all kinds of things you can do, with flushing the quarterback out and having somebody run a certain way and flush them a certain way on purpose,
Right.
so that you can have another guy run them down. Because Michael Vick was at the Eagles when I was with the 49ers. You don't think we had to have a lot of different things that we had to do,
Right.
and I had Pat Willis. I was coaching Pat Willis, and Pat ran a 4.29 in the combine. And Pat Willis during the game, we ended up beating him out there. But we had Pat Willis as our spy, and we flushed him on purpose to Pat Willis's side. I'll never forget. I'm on the sidelines, and Vic outran Willis. He ran him off the sideline, and Willis runs right up to me and smiling, going, "God, Coach, you're right. He can run." Now this guy don't run like Vic, but
Right.
he can run, and he's stronger. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time on your rush lanes and exactly how you're going to attack him. That's going to be obviously a big key of the game. And then you're going to have to hold up man to man on the perimeter, with the receivers.
Yeah.
Because he's going to go deep. You would try to force him to throw and beat you with intermediate routes.
Right.
Try to make sure you take the top off of all the deep routes and don't let him run. And those would be my two big things that I would work extremely hard at. If he's going to beat us, he's got to beat us with intermediate routes,
right,
and their run game.
And in the other game, you got Penix, who likes to scramble, but not to run, but to throw. They like to throw a lot of deep routes, a lot of long over routes, corner routes, post patterns. If you're Texas, they've been a little vulnerable in the secondary. Texas has. How do you, again, the same deal. You want to try to contain Penix because, again, he's going to scramble to throw the ball down the field. He's got 3 NFL wide receivers.
Those receivers, especially the one.
Rome Odunze.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Big, strong, gets the ball. I mean, boy, I don't know how I would, you got to disrupt those receivers. I try to press them as much as I could and get my hands all over them, but you better have somebody over the top, and you better be able to double cover, one or two of them
right
at the right time. And you can with different calls and different things you do. Because to me, those receivers are that
they're gonna
good.
Can hurt you.
Yeah.
All right, Coach. So give me a prediction. Sounds like you like Washington and maybe Alabama lean. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the right word is lean because, I think they'll be really close games. I would be surprised. I think Washington, Texas will probably be really high scoring. I don't see it as much with the Alabama-Michigan game as being as high scoring because you got two really good defenses. It's going to be really interesting to see Michigan's defense against Alabama's offense because Michigan's got, the best defense in the country statistically. And to slow Alabama down, I don't think that'll be a high scoring game, but also the last thing, I know we're going to go here in a bit, but special teams are going to be that big of a deal.
Yes.
And the coaches know it too. And somebody's going to win or lose probably because something on special teams. Man, you got to really work your return game. You're going to have to, work on going after blocking a punt.
And making your kicks, making the makeable field goals. That's key too, man. Make the makeable field goals.
Because both games could come down to that.
No doubt. Well, Coach Leavitt, great analysis. I know I'd asked you a bunch of different things, but you were all over it like usual. Thanks for the time. Happy New Year. I know you'll be sitting there watching these games as closely as everybody else will. I know you know a lot of people around the country involved in these games. So congratulations to your people that you've worked with that are in these games, your strength guys at Washington. So I know you're proud of him and all the different people in all these different programs. So, Coach, appreciate it. We'll be in touch. Have a happy New Year with the girls, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Thank you. Same to you. All right. Bye.